"Thank you, Calbert," the old man said, accepting the basket of freshly picked apples. Calbert pulled back his large, tired hand. "You are welcome, Samuel." The kind troll had made it a social point to know the people of this small town by name. He turned to walk down the cobblestone road and continued his march to deliver fruit from his orchard to everyone. He adjusted the bundle that hung over his shoulder and rested across his arching back. The weight was no issue. He was more concerned about the many baskets falling off and spilling his hard work onto the ground. Thankfully, there were only a few deliveries left to make that night. He knocked on the next door. No one answered. This was Harlow's house. He never opened the door to anyone at night. He knew Calbert well, but had a superstition about opening his front door when the moon was high. Something about inviting the restless dead inside. Calbert took a basket of Granny Smiths off his bundle and left it beside the door where Harlow would find it later. Only one more basket. He took it from his bundle to check the name written on the tag. Most of his baskets didn't have one, but some of the neighbors had specific requests which he was sure to honor. This basket was full of golden, delicious apples and was destined for the place Calbert was saving for last. The familiar sounds of rowdy patrons and whimsical music met his pointed ears as he neared the establishment of Gregory Heading, a local inn with a quaint bar built into it, where the sweetest cider would be crafted out of these beautiful apples. Calbert liked going there to sample the literal fruits of his labor. He stepped inside and went straight to the bar, where he found Gregory waiting for him expectantly. "Good evening, Calbert." He waved the troll over. "Evening, Gregory." Calbert sat next to him and presented the basket. "I've a fine harvest this night. And a fine cider I'm sure they'll make." Gregory took the basket and tucked it next to his stool. "What will it be, old friend? The usual?" Calbert nodded with a smile. "Not so much of it tonight, though. I'm expecting company tomorrow night. I'd like to have my wits about me and not have a headache when they're here." "Ah, some visiting relatives? Or perhaps someone of romantic interest?" Gregory raised a brow teasingly. Calbert paused for a moment. "Not exactly," he answered, glancing to one side. "But it is someone who's been looking for me." Gregory's face quickly melted into concern. "Who then?" Calbert looked over to see that his pint of ale had arrived and snatched it to take a gulp. "An adventurer is coming to town very soon," he spoke hesitantly. "And you know how most adventurers get about trolls." His hands trembled as he spoke. "I'm a little scared." "A little? Calbert, I can see how much you're shaking." Gregory leaned over to take the pint out of the troll's hand. "I think you should maybe go home right away. The last thing we want when that adventurer gets here is a troll that's howling drunk. You know how you get with too many of these." He held up the half-empty pint. Calbert nodded and hopped off the stool. "You're right. I should go. Thank you, friend. Anything for a respected citizen of the town we share and the bringer of these quality apples." Gregory held up the basket of golden delicious with a warm grin stretching over his face. Calbert chuckled as he walked out the door and back into the street. He looked to the horizon past the roofs. The sky was beginning to brighten and the stars were fading. Sun's going to be up soon. Better get home quickly. The troll marched out of town and toward his orchard just beyond a low hill. The trees stood devoid of apples, courtesy of Calbert's labor earlier that night. He smiled, seeing the leaves had begun turning red. Soon his harvesting days would be put on hold for the winter. His house stood beyond the orchard. He had built it from any rocks he could find and carry, and sealed every crack with mud and clay so it would last long and not let in the sun. Most trolls would choose to live in a cave, but he wanted to be close to town and be surrounded by his apple trees and farmland. He shuffled through the doorway and heaved a heavy stone to cover it. The space was quaint and decently lit by a chaotic arrangement of candles. There wasn't much room, but it suited his needs just fine. He rolled into bed and pulled up the covers. The wooden frame creaked with every movement. He closed his eyes to sleep until the next sunset. Calbert woke up the next night, refreshed and ready to prepare his autumn crops. He brushed himself off, shoved the stone door out of his way, and stepped outside just in time to see the last bit of pink leave the sky. In the distance, he could make out the light of a lantern. The man holding it marched in his direction. He wore armor and had a sword sheathed on his belt. Calbert's heart crept up his throat as he realized this must be the adventurer he'd been dreading. He had heard rumors of his travels through the kingdom. He sucked in a deep breath through his nose and let it out with a sigh. He wasn't going to panic. He wasn't going to provoke this man. He was going to remain calm. Calbert leaned back into his house to grab a satchel and sling it over his shoulder. Then he turned to his fields to check his crops. Maybe he'd start with the cabbages. They were the closest. "Hey!" the man called out. "I see you, troll!" Already the man showed aggression, as if Calbert wasn't too much on edge. "Hello, good sir." He tried his best to sound calm and inviting. "Is there anything I can help you with?" The adventurer's eyes widened, and he stopped walking. He shook off his surprise and scowled. "What is it you're doing here?" Calbert removed his bag from his shoulder and gently placed it beside him on the ground. "I was just about to tend to my cabbages, see how far along they are before harvest." Sweat started to collect on his brow as he feared the worst. "Is that so?" the adventurer asked, a note of accusation in his voice. "If you don't believe me, you are welcome to watch. Mind you, I have a large field, so it's going to be a while before I'm done. I'm not here to watch a troll inspect cabbages. I'm here because I heard of you invading a nearby town." The man drew his sword and pointed it at Calbert. Calbert flinched, took another deep breath, and continued. "Are those the words that were used, or just the ones you heard?" He collected his satchel and placed it back over his shoulder. "I assure you, if you visit that town, the residents will tell you a very different story. Now please, I have a lot of work that needs to be done before morning." The adventurer's sword drooped as his face faded from aggression to confusion. Calbert couldn't quite tell in the light, but he thought he could see disappointment there too. I'll be back for you, troll," the adventurer stuttered as he turned to leave. He took off in the direction of town. Calbert smiled, relieved that this interaction went so well. The townsfolk ought to set this man straight. In the meantime, those cabbages still needed his attention. Late into the night, Calbert finally reached the last specimen in his crop. All seemed well, and they'd be ready for harvest in no time. He hadn't heard again from the adventurer, so he decided to head into town and visit his favorite inn. He arrived there and immediately spotted the adventurer sitting alone at a table near the bar. He shuffled over and ordered a pint of cider before joining the man. "Had any enlightening experiences here?" he asked. The adventurer didn't look up to answer. "Your words were true. Everyone here knows you by name, and you them." He snatched his own pint and took a swig. "Never in my life have I encountered a town that was so comfortable with such a beast." "You call me a beast like I'm no different from a provoked bear, yet here I sit, calmly speaking to you like a civilized member of society. Would a beast behave in such a way?" The man ran a hand through his messy hair. "I suppose not. But that doesn't change the fact that you are a troll. Generally, trolls are—" "I know how trolls usually are," Calbert interrupted, raising his hand. "Trolls are monsters, not just to humans, but to our own kind. You're born a troll. Your parents expect you to fend for yourself at the age of 4. So they toss you into a pit and expect you to creep out and find a new cave to hide in." Calbert paused, remembering his own upbringing. Thankfully, the people here were so hospitable. Calbert leaned over the table, resting his chin in one hand, the other still holding his pint. "In their eyes, I'm no different from the rest of them, and I feel no different from them." He smiled. "That makes me the better troll." The adventurer lifted himself up and took another gulp of his drink. He looked at the pint for a moment. "I noticed you had an orchard beside your house." "Yes." "Is this cider made from those apples by any chance?" Only my best golden, delicious apples for the sweetest taste. Calvert leaned back and took a sip of his own drink. Like it? The adventurer chuckled. Best I've sampled yet.